Aleister Crowley, visionary, magician, and one of the most controversial figures in modern occultism. But what if I told you that Crowley's vision went beyond magic and mere rituals? In this video, we'll look at how Crowley's quest to establish a universal religion changed the spiritual landscape forever, and why his influence still resonates today. Stick around to uncover the deeper side of Crowley that most people miss. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I will leave a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. Now, let's explore Crowley and occultism. Aleister Crowley is one of the most influential and controversial figures in the history of occultism. His life, works, and writings have been deeply influential to many esoteric currents throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Aleister Crowley is, of course, the founder of Thelema, the central tenet of which is, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and "Love is the law, love under will." Central to Thelema is the idea of discovering and pursuing one's divinely appointed mission in life, or purpose. This idea of a personal divine mission has been deeply influential, not just to occultism, but to all spiritual currents since Crowley's time. The main text of Thelema is the Book of the Law. Crowley claimed to have received this book from a discarnate entity calling itself Aiwaz in the year 1904. Of course, making contact with spirits, angels, and demons is a central part of the tradition of occultism. Crowley developed and expanded upon the practice of magick, which he spelled with a K to differentiate it from stage magic. Magic, of course, has been part of occultism since the time of the Renaissance. Crowley developed and innovated the practice of magic to introduce meditation and trance states into it, using techniques such as drugs and sex to heighten one's level of consciousness. Aleister Crowley has been associated with several occult orders, including the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the AA, which was his own teaching order, and Ordo Templi Orientis. Crowley was a prolific writer of texts on occultism. Some of his most important works having to do with occultism include Magick, also called Liber Abba or Book 4, and the Book of Thoth, which is a book-length treatise on the tarot. In short, Crowley's influence on occultism has been vast. It ranges from esoteric philosophy to the practical applications of magic. His teachings continue to be highly influential, both within and without organizations that are dedicated to the philosophy of Thelema. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the way Crowley understood occultism differs in some important ways from how we understand it today. For example, today, occultism is often contrasted with a scientific or materialistic point of view. However, that was not the case in Crowley's time or the centuries leading up to his birth. Occultism can arguably be traced back to the Renaissance. There are many figures and schools of thought that came together to create the occult tradition. Some important figures include Marsilio Ficino, Pico delle Mirandola, and Cornelius Agrippa. Some of the important traditions include Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Neoplatonism. Giordano Bruno was a very important figure in the history of occultism. Far from being someone who was into superstition, he was an advocate of the science of his time, and he enthusiastically embraced heliocentrism. He thought that the Copernican revolution presaged humanity's return to ancient sun religion, which he saw as a magical religion founded upon man's relationship to nature. He saw magical sun worship as an antidote to what he viewed as the superstition of Christianity. Naturally, the church responded by burning him at the stake in the year 1600, but his influence continued on in the traditions of Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry, which continued to hand down occult teachings, but now through secret societies. Richard Payne Knight was another important figure in the history of occultism. Richard Payne Knight thought that all religion could be derived from the worship of the generative powers. Phallicism, as it came to be called, became an important element in occultism in the 19th century, and it was considered to offer a naturalistic explanation for religion. Eliphas Lévy was a very important figure in French occultism. In 1861, he published La Clé des Grands Mystères, The Key to the Great Mysteries. In this book, he propounded the following principles of a scientific occult religion. 1. To demonstrate in a certain and absolute manner the existence of God, and to give an idea of him which will satisfy all minds. 2. To establish the existence of a true religion in such a way as to render it incontestable. 3. To indicate the bearing and the raison d'etre of all the mysteries of the one true and universal religion. 4. To turn the objections of philosophy into arguments favorable to true religion. 5. To draw the boundary between religion and superstition, and to give the reason of miracles and prodigies. Crowley was so deeply influenced by these ideas that he actually claimed he wrote this book in a past life when he was Eliphas Lévy. Crowley was also of the opinion that the reception of the Book of the Law and the religion that it founded, Thelema, satisfied the principles that Lévy had written down. I've heard people try to make a distinction between the earlier Crowley, who was more skeptical, versus the later Crowley who thought that Aiwass was a real being separate from him. Or they try to make a distinction between the earlier experimental Crowley versus the later Crowley the prophet. This is a false distinction. The entire tradition of occultism was about using skeptical and experimental methods to prove the postulates of religion. The idea was to come up with reliable experimental means of contacting those entities, like the angel Gabriel that gave the Quran to Muhammad, or the entities that were responsible for founding the world's other religions. This is quite different from how we tend to think of occultism now. Different occultists have different views on exactly what angels, demons, and spirits are supposed to be. However, very few occultists today are trying to establish a universal religion. Aleister Crowley and arguably Carl Jung were the last people to stand in this tradition of occultism that was focused on founding universal religion. In contrast to how they looked at things, occultism now tends to be viewed in opposition to religion. The reason that this change in the understanding of occultism took place was probably because of scientific developments that were occurring around the time that Crowley was alive. It wasn't the development of the hard sciences like physics and chemistry and biology that dealt this blow to occultism. It was probably more likely the soft sciences like psychology and sociology. It seemed as though psychology and sociology were better equipped to explain the foundations of religion rather than something like phallicism or sun worship or direct communication from discarnate entities. Indeed, insofar as occultists are likely to give a scientific explanation for what they do today, they tend to rely on psychology to do that. I think the reason that Crowley has continued to be so influential today, even though this project of universal religion fell apart, is because of the concept of true will. True will taps into this idea which is really popular today, which is that your spirituality should be something deeply personal to you. By putting true will at the center of Thelema, I think Crowley laid the foundation for an idea that would become incredibly popular throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Crowley was a hugely influential figure in occultism. I think we have to keep in mind that how Crowley thought about occultism is in some ways very different from how we think about it today. In particular, in order to understand this project of founding a universal religion that Crowley was really interested in, we have to transport ourselves out of our current mindset and enter into a very different world with very different assumptions. Were you surprised to find out how different Crowley's assumptions were from our own today? Leave a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, I would bet you're going to really like this other video as well, so make sure you go and watch it right now. And until next time, love is the law, love under will.